Hello, Amy here, and welcome to the Negotiation Illuminators podcast, where we shed a different perspective on negotiation. Negotiation does not have to be scary, intimidating, or something that only salespeople do. No one is born a negotiator. It is a learned skill that anyone can own. I will be inviting experienced negotiators to the show where we will be sharing their top tips, exclusive insights, and valuable lessons learned, all to help boost your confidence in negotiation. Hello, today we are joined by Tony Evans. We both worked together at Mindshare a little while ago, where he brought press buying skills into the digital department. This was referenced by James Chandler on a previous episode. He brings with him almost 14 years experience from Facebook, where he was brought in to be the global head of trading and then moved on to be the marketing science director. Tony is here to share his insights and experiences on negotiation. Tony, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. This is an absolute honor.
When or how did you learn to negotiate?
Everything I learned about negotiation, I learned from Monopoly. So I'm one of four brothers. And in the days when I grew up, your parents couldn't shut you up with an iPhone or an iPad. And when I'd play with my brothers, I just had this natural kind of way of finding a curvy way around a situation. So let's say you've got two of the properties of a set that you need, and you've got to find the third one, and someone's got it. Like, how do you manage to get that property from them and still win the game without paying too much for it? And I would do these deals. Well, if you give me that property at this price, then I'll give you free parking. So that was probably my first forays into negotiation.
What about work?
My first job in advertising, I worked at Zenith Media. I was a press buyer. And in those days, we had data that you had to go to books for, as opposed to go to the internet for, because there wasn't even a computer on every desk in those days. And you'd use this information to infuse your negotiations. And that's probably where I learned a lot of how to use data to inform my negotiations.
What are some of the common negotiation mistakes you see people make, and how could they be avoided?
I will talk about three things here: preparation for negotiations, the fact that you're selling all the time in the negotiation, and then forgetting about the long term. The preparation, the more information you have, the more power that is that you bring into the negotiation room. I would use anything that I thought could provide an angle or may be useful in a negotiation. I would look up financial information on the company that we were negotiating with, so that if I saw that they were having a rough time, I know there's more pressure on the sales guys to do deals in a particular way. Knowing the market factors, knowing how strong they are relative to their competition, I don't believe you can over prepare. You can definitely under prepare, and that's a huge mistake. The second thing I mentioned in terms of selling, even as buyers, we developed this notion of selling the money, the idea that you had to position things in a particular way. Why should someone sell to you at a particular price, whether that is media or whether that's a car or a house or whatever? Positioning things in a particular way. Why should you do this? And so I think that is important for all buyers to remember, that you're selling the concept of why to do this rather than just buying and here's the price. And the last thing I mentioned was forgetting about the long term. I remember bumping into with the CEO in the company, sales director from a newspaper, and he turned around and he referenced something that had happened on a client. And as we walked further down the stairs, the sales director who I was with for the meeting turned around and he goes, "Do you know what? That was 20 years ago." People have long memories. That was the first thing the CEO thought of when he saw that sales director. And you've got to focus on how this is going to be for a long period of time, and not just on the win that is your immediate negotiation.
So you said you've seen a lot of under preparation. You don't think you can necessarily over prepare. Do you have any advice on how you get that balance right before you go in?
I think if you're preparing for a negotiation 5 minutes before the call, you're doing the wrong thing. I was thinking about negotiations for a period of time leading up to them, depending on the size of the negotiation. definitely preparing the day before. And so as I go into the morning, I've had the night to sleep and at the night to think about how I'm positioning things. And the investment in time pays off. To your question, I think all you could look at is if you get caught out, don't get caught out again. I don't know you ever finish learning, right? Like there's things that influence you over time. But I've learned through the years different things from different countries. There are different norms and things that are acceptable. There's a different dance that's done in each place. So the learning never stops.
What is the one thing you wish someone had told your younger self about negotiation?
I wish that I understood my own reaction to things. I mean, body reaction to things far better. If you think about how we are as humans, we have evolved over hundreds of thousands to millions of years to the stage that we are. And we've got these processes in our brains to react to the threat in front of us. Our amygdala is a bit that fires up the fight or flight kind of reaction. And the reason it fires up is that here's a threat. Here comes an animal. It's going to eat me. Quick, run away. And so your body just like constricts all of its energy and resources. It heightens the pace of your heart so that you can get away on your toes and run away, or you can stand and fight. And so the amygdala, when it fires, taking a lot of your brain processing power. What you're not getting into when your amygdala is firing is the work in the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is the bit of your brain that's actually responsible for better decision making. And when your amygdala is firing, prefrontal cortex switched off because you need everything for the fight or flight. When I would, in my 20s, when I would negotiate, if I get angry about something, I'd get very argumentative and it would turn into an argument rather than me being able to think decently. I would feel my blood rising, as in my heart starting to beat faster. And I know that I'm not as good in a negotiation when I'm angry, when I'm annoyed about something, when I'm trying to deal with somebody who is arguing with me. I need to be able to take a step back and think clearly, prefrontal cortex. And I didn't know any of this stuff. You can't stop this reaction. What you can do is to understand that it happens and it's a totally natural thing. Am I ready to fight? Or am I actually making a proper decision? Is this the right decision to make?
So, how do you put that into practice now?
I am far better these days at being able to pause. And the pause can happen in a couple of ways. The pause is just a breath to make sure I'm reflecting. I'm thinking about my heartbeat. I'm thinking about the reaction. Maybe I'm calmer as I'm older. And then taking deeper breaths. Right? It's amazing how much difference breathing actually makes for calming down. Or it is also a useful thing if you need to get out of that situation. If you know that you can't make a good decision or you think you can't make a good decision, you need to leave. I need some time to think about this. I need to refer this to someone else, particularly if you're working on your own. I've worked in pairs in negotiation for a very long period of time because one person can observe whilst the other person is negotiating, and leaving the room so you can discuss much, much better than doing the wrong deal on the spot.
Power of pairs.
The power
I
of
like
pairs.
that.
It works. It works very, very well because back to what I was saying a second ago, when I am speaking, and particularly if I'm trying to control my amygdala operator, I'm not listening as well. Having somebody else to really listen and observe both you and also the reactions, not to get involved in the negotiation, to listen, to take notes, and then to refer back is a great thing to do.
What are some effective techniques for handling difficult or aggressive people during a negotiation?
The negotiations that I used to see and used to witness when everything was done on the phone were pretty shouty, and particularly the TV deals that were done in those days were incredibly shouty. The agency that I worked for, when you joined the department as a graduate, the first thing you were taught on day one was how to fix your phone when you broke it, because people would slam the receivers down on the phone. There was a gentleman who was responsible as a trading director for an agency's negotiations, and he would famously twirl a baseball bat around whilst pacing around his office when you were in it. And so when I think about that, there is a great moment, one of my favorite films, True Romance. Scene that I'm referring to is from Christopher Walken, who's playing a mob boss, Dennis Hopper, who's a cop. Mob boss is trying to get information out of the cop. And he talks about being Sicilian as he's a mob boss. And he says, like, Sicilians are great liars. And we're great at reading people because we have all this experience at like being lied to. And he says to the cop, when the cop is not giving him the information, but pretending that he is, what we've got here is a game of show and tell. Now, you're trying to tell me nothing, but you're showing me everything. And that phrase really stuck with me. I think it's a really important one to relate back to my friend with the baseball bat. You're showing me everything by your behaviors, that you think that the only way that you're going to win this negotiation is by intimidation. And that I would recommend is a good way. Staying calm in that situation. If someone's trying to intimidate you, think about what they're really telling you.
So by recognizing how the other person's behaving, you can almost gauge perhaps how that conversation is even going.
There's so many levels to this. Body language is a classic one that some people kind of get into and start looking at. The little ways that we give ourselves away, the touching of the nose, the touching of the ears, how someone's breathing, sitting forward, licking your lips. That's a sign that, like, I want that, if you can spot those signs and understand them. The other stuff that we spoke about earlier on, like looking for someone's kind of raised tempo of speech because their heartbeat is raised and they are either under threat or they're excited.
I often talk about the power of pause. I'm quite a fast talker, so pauses are a little bit more difficult for me, but I've worked with a lot of people now, especially from the data industry, where people that are thinking and processing need to have a pause. So even recognizing when somebody pauses, why are they doing that? Have they lost interest? Are they looking? I think if you look up left, you're thinking, but just understanding what somebody's behavior or lack of behavior means to the circumstance that you're in.
Definitely. And you touch on an interesting one there, which is the power of silence. If you're putting something out as an offer and you're not confident in it, and you then jump in and start justifying it, you're giving everything away, which is, instead of I'm very confident in what I've just offered you, it is really, really difficult to put something out there and then sit back and not speak.
My advice would be practice at home, practice on your friends, practice on your family, and have a quick look at how long you can pause for, because 30 seconds is a long time.
Definitely. It's a horrendously long time. Think about something different during this time.
I say as a coach, notice what you notice. So if your mind is busy in that quiet, watch what the other person does. Do they squirm?
Definitely.
Do they stare at you and not say something either? I think the more you practice those pauses and focus on what the other person's doing, it becomes a little bit more natural.
Totally.
Who is your negotiation role model?
My second job, there was a gentleman, McCloskey, who within the press buying world was incredibly well known, incredibly sharp intellect, but also hugely charming, and learning his skill of charm was a huge benefit to me. The person that is probably my ultimate negotiator as a role model is Hal Kayali. Hal I worked with at Mindshare. First of all, he bought TV for Ford. I bought press for Ford. Hal is incredibly sharp, the best person in terms of figures that I know. His preparation second to none in terms of how he approached everything. His attention to detail, absolutely meticulous. I managed to persuade Hal to come and join me at Facebook, so he was my opposite number and then went on to be global head of trading after me. I hired someone better than myself deliberately, and I'd highly recommend doing that. Hire people that are going to make you better. Hal brought a new dimension to my game that was absolutely brilliant. And so having somebody who's better than you alongside you at the same time fills you with confidence. And like so much of a negotiation is a confidence game. I'm super lucky to have had a number of role models. I don't know that the same people exist that teach us in that way that I was lucky to learn from over the years. And this is why it's great that there's now someone in your position helping coach people through this, right? Like that's something that if it existed when I was younger, I definitely would have needed if I didn't have those role models. If you're on your own learning to negotiate, of course it's going to be intimidating. Of course it's going to be nerve-wracking. Having somebody to help you through this and say, look, this is natural, what you're feeling. Here's the tactics to explore in order to get over it. Having a coach to help you through this is a wonderful thing.
I do say to a lot of people, that's why I believe, and I've set this up, it was making those mistakes or figuring out how to negotiate like the wild, wild west in Mindshare in those early days where I got feedback from people like yourselves or other heads of departments. That's how I learned how to get better at it. So I truly believe getting feedback or somebody having your back as you're learning a new skill can be key at building confidence. Those role models are things that you admire. What have you seen that you don't admire in a negotiator?
I've never really admired shouters. I've seen people lie, barefaced lie. I've seen some very painful situations where people have been caught out. And once you've lost respect for someone, once you've lost trust, the chances of you ever doing business in the same way again are very, very slim.
Often people ask me in negotiation training, what about saying you have another offer on the table or using it as a tactic? And I don't believe in that, because you're almost risking a relationship and that possibility of working together in the future. You're more likely to trip up. It's important to be genuine, and lying is counterintuitive to that. Last question that I ask all of my guests: if the word negotiation was removed entirely from the dictionary, what word would you use instead and why?
So I think negotiation is part dance, it's part selling, and it's part debating. And so it's kind of a combination of all of those things. And maybe if you merge those three words together, dance, debating, selling, dabbing, that would be my word.
Right, Tony, thank you for all your insights and experience.
The pleasure's all mine. Thank you so much for giving me the honor of coming on your show.
Hello, Amy here. Thank you for listening to the Negotiation Illuminators podcast. To find out more about future episodes or to receive negotiation top tips, please sign up to my newsletter. The link can be found below. Bye bye for now.